My husband's mistress humiliated me at his $17 million party. So I sold my stake and left him begging. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved one. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. Imagine standing at your husband's $17 million party, wearing the most elegant dress you could find, your hair styled just right, a smile painted carefully across your face. Everything around you sparkles, champagne glasses clinking, music floating through the air, and investors congratulating the man you thought was your partner in every sense of the word. Now imagine in the middle of that perfect picture, the woman he has been secretly sharing his life with decides to humiliate you. That was my reality. My name is Claire Mitchell, and this is the night that changed everything. My husband, David Mitchell, had always been a man people admired. In his early 40s, with charm that drew people in, he knew how to hold attention and make others feel like they were part of something bigger. I once believed his charisma was a blessing for both of us. We built a business together, put in long nights, and pushed through challenges until we reached success. That party, worth more than I could have ever dreamed, was supposed to be a celebration of all our sacrifices. Instead, it revealed the deepest betrayal I never wanted to face. Her name was Vanessa Carter. She was younger, bold, and walked into every room like she owned it. People noticed her because she wanted to be noticed, and David encouraged it. For months I had watched her hanging around, always introduced as his assistant, always just close enough to make me uneasy. I ignored my instincts, convincing myself I was imagining things, because the truth would have been too painful to accept. That night, however, there was no hiding. Surrounded by powerful investors, friends, and colleagues, Vanessa made her move. She smiled sweetly at me, the kind of smile that hides poison behind it, and whispered just loud enough for the people around us to hear. "Claire, that dress is brave. I'm surprised you'd wear something so outdated tonight of all nights." A couple of men standing nearby shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid looking at me. One even laughed quietly before catching himself. In that moment, my heart dropped. My face felt hot, but I forced myself to keep smiling. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down in front of everyone. I swallowed the lump in my throat, lifted my glass, and nodded as though her words hadn't pierced through me like knives. Inside, though, I was shattered. The humiliation wasn't just about a dress. It was the unspoken claim she was making, that she belonged there more than I did, that she had taken my place. I stayed silent, but a storm began brewing inside me. I didn't know it then, but her cruelty had lit a fire I would never put out. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. When I look back at the early days, I remember how much I believed in David and in us. We were not just a married couple, we were partners in every sense. I put everything I had into the life we were building together. After my parents passed, I received an inheritance that could have given me the chance to follow my own path, maybe even start something that belonged only to me. Instead, I chose to invest it all into David's vision. I believed in his drive, his dreams, and I wanted to be part of creating something we could both be proud of. Those first years were hard. We worked long hours, skipped vacations, and lived on very little while pouring every resource into the company. I was there beside him for every late-night meeting and every risky decision. I told myself that all the sacrifices would one day be worth it, and for a while it really did feel that way. When we started seeing success, I thought it was proof that we had made the right choices, that we were stronger because we had built it together. But slowly, things began to change. David wasn't the same man I had married. As the company grew, so did his ego. He loved being in the spotlight, and he loved how people looked at him like he was untouchable. The man who once sat across the kitchen table sketching business ideas with me started treating me more like background noise. I went from being a partner to being just his wife, the one who stayed home, the one whose opinions didn't matter anymore. At first, I tried to ignore the shift. I told myself he was just busy, that success came with pressure, and that I needed to give him space. But then the distance became something else. He traveled more often, and when he was home, his attention was never really there. Conversations became short. My presence seemed to irritate him, as if I were getting in the way. It was like I had been moved to the sidelines of my own marriage. That was when Vanessa appeared. David introduced her casually, saying she was his new assistant. I tried to smile and welcome her, because that was what a supportive wife was supposed to do. But the moment I saw the way he looked at her, I knew. His eyes lingered a little too long. His tone softened in a way it hadn't with me in months. And Vanessa seemed to enjoy it, like she knew exactly what she was doing. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I had no proof, and the last thing I wanted was to look insecure. So I swallowed my doubts and pushed them down, trying to keep my focus on the business and the life I thought we were still sharing. But deep inside, a quiet fear started growing, a fear that the man I trusted had already begun building a life that no longer included me. The night of the celebration was supposed to be a turning point. David had worked for months to plan the event, and it showed. The ballroom shimmered with crystal lights, the tables decorated with expensive flowers, and a string quartet filled the air with music. Guests dressed in their best suits and gowns, investors sipping champagne while congratulating David for another milestone. I stood at his side, smiling as though everything was perfect, though inside I felt like an outsider at my own husband's achievement. Vanessa arrived like she owned the place. She wore a red gown that caught every eye in the room, her laughter louder than anyone else's, her hand never far from David's arm. Wherever he went, she followed. She leaned in close when he spoke, laughed too hard at his jokes, and introduced herself with confidence to every investor as if she were part of his success. David didn't push her away. Instead, he let her linger, almost encouraging her to play the role that should have been mine. I tried to focus on the people around me, keeping conversations light, but my ears caught every word she spoke. It wasn't long before her attention turned to me. I had been standing near a group of investors when her voice cut through the chatter. "That's Claire," she said with a laugh, her tone sharp enough to slice through my composure. "The boring wife who doesn't know when to step aside." The words hit me like a punch. I froze, my glass of champagne trembling in my hand. The men around her laughed softly, though it wasn't real laughter. It was awkward, forced, the kind people give when they don't know how else to react. Their eyes flicked toward me and then away, not wanting to get caught in the middle. But the damage was done. My face burned, my heart felt like it was sinking into the floor, and the room suddenly felt too big, too bright, too loud. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her out, to tell David to stop this madness and put her in her place. But I couldn't. Not there. Not in front of everyone who had come to celebrate the empire we had built. My pride kept me standing tall even as I felt myself breaking inside. I smiled, nodded politely to the men near me, and excused myself from the circle as though nothing had happened. But as I walked away, her laughter echoed in my head. That cruel, triumphant sound made it clear. She wasn't just mocking me. She was claiming victory. She wanted everyone to see me as nothing more than a shadow in David's world. I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. I stood still in the corner of that glittering room, holding myself together. And in that moment, a quiet thought formed in my mind, stronger than the hurt. This ends tonight. I didn't confront either of them at the party. I stood there quietly, watching, memorizing every smirk on Vanessa's face, and every time David chose to lean toward her instead of me. I noticed the glances from the investors, the way some whispered behind their glasses, and the uncomfortable silence that followed whenever Vanessa made another cutting remark. I kept my head high, but inside I was recording everything, every small detail I would later hold on to. By the end of the night, my smile felt frozen in place. I shook hands, thanked people for coming, and pretended I didn't notice when Vanessa practically clung to David's arm as though she had earned the right to stand where I was supposed to. It took everything in me not to break in front of all those people, but I knew showing weakness there would only give her more power. So, I stayed silent, waiting for the night to be over. On the drive home, the air between us was thick and cold. I stared out the window, my hands clasped in my lap, trying to hold back the flood of emotions. David finally spoke, his tone sharp and careless. "You're too sensitive, Claire. Vanessa was only joking. You make everything bigger than it really is." His words cut deeper than Vanessa's had. Instead of defending me, instead of acknowledging how cruel she had been, he brushed it off and turned the blame onto me. I wanted to argue, to shout that I wasn't imagining things, that everyone in that room had seen what happened. But I stayed quiet. If I spoke, I knew it would only turn into another fight where my feelings were dismissed. So I swallowed the hurt, pressing my nails into my palms, and let the silence stretch between us. That night, when we finally reached home, I closed the bedroom door behind me and let the tears fall. I cried into my pillow quietly, so he wouldn't hear. It wasn't just pain I felt, it was the weight of betrayal, the realization that the man I had built my life with no longer saw me as his partner. The woman he allowed to humiliate me in front of everyone was more important to him than protecting my dignity. But as the hours passed, my tears slowed. My mind grew sharper. Lying there in the dark, I began to think not about what I had lost, but about what I still had. I remembered the years I spent helping build the company. I remembered the documents, the contracts, the shares that bore my name. Nearly half of what David claimed as his empire was mine too. For the first time that night, I felt a spark of strength inside me. I might not have been able to stop Vanessa from mocking me at that party, but I still had something she could never take away. My stake in the company was my power, and I knew eventually I would use it. The morning after that painful night, I woke up with swollen eyes but a sharper mind. My tears had dried, and what remained was a quiet determination. If David thought I would stay blind while he disrespected me, he was wrong. I knew I needed the truth, not suspicions, not guesses, but proof. That was when I made the decision to hire a private investigator. I didn't tell anyone, not even the closest friends I still trusted. This was something I had to do alone. The investigator I chose had a reputation for being discreet, someone who wouldn't breathe a word to anyone outside our agreement. When we met, I laid everything out plainly. I need to know where my husband goes, what he's doing, and who he's really spending his money on, I said. He nodded without judgment, only asking for the details he would need to follow David without raising suspicion. The days that followed were a strange mix of dread and relief. Part of me prayed the investigator would find nothing, that I was simply overreacting, that David wasn't as careless as I feared. But deep down, I already knew. Each time I thought about Vanessa, about the way she held herself so confidently at the party, I realized no one could act like that unless they had been promised something. When the evidence finally came back, my heart still sank. There were photos of David meeting Vanessa at expensive restaurants, of him holding her hand like she was the only woman in the world. There were hotel records, late-night visits, and even receipts for jewelry he had given her. But the part that cut the deepest wasn't just the affair, it was the money. Bank statements showed he had been using company accounts to fund Vanessa's lifestyle. Clothing, vacations, even a new car, paid for with resources that weren't his alone. They belonged to the company. They belonged, in part, to me. The betrayal burned, but along with the pain came clarity. For the first time, I wasn't guessing. I had proof of everything. Proof that he had chosen her. Proof that he had stolen from the business I helped build. Proof that I wasn't imagining the distance growing between us. With the evidence in hand, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Sitting across from him, I laid out the documents the investigator had gathered. He studied them carefully before looking at me with steady eyes. "Claire," he said, "you need to understand something. You are not powerless here. You own 45% of the company. That gives you significant leverage. David cannot simply push you aside, no matter what he's been doing behind your back." For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control return to me. My world had been shaken, but I still had a foundation to stand on. David might have thought I was weak, but he had forgotten the most important truth. I was still his partner on paper, and I had the power to decide what came next. It was a quiet evening at home when the final piece of my marriage broke. David had come back from another trip, his phone buzzing every few minutes. He barely looked at me as he poured himself a drink and sat down in the living room. I tried to speak with him, to ask how the meetings went, but he brushed me off with one-word answers. The distance between us felt heavier than ever. Finally, I asked him directly, "David, do you even see me as your partner anymore?" He laughed, not kindly, but with a sharp edge that made my stomach twist. "Claire," he said, shaking his head, "you just don't get it. You've become comfortable. Vanessa challenges me. She makes me feel alive, like I can take bigger risks. You're holding me back." Those words cut deeper than any evidence I had seen, deeper than any humiliation at that party. He wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just careless with money. He had completely stripped me of respect in his mind. I wasn't his equal, not his partner, not even his wife in the way he once promised. In that moment, I saw the truth. He had already chosen her in his heart. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply sat there, staring at the man I no longer recognized. Once upon a time, we had built dreams together, but now he was looking at me like I was an obstacle he needed to get rid of. My chest ached, but underneath the pain, there was something else, a rising strength I hadn't felt in years. That night, as he poured himself another drink and scrolled through his phone, I silently made my decision. I wasn't going to beg him to love me again. I wasn't going to cry for his attention or compete with Vanessa. That kind of desperation was beneath me, and it wasn't who I was. Instead, I was going to walk away. But I wouldn't just leave. I would make sure I walked away in a way that he would never recover from. I thought of everything I had learned in the last few weeks. The evidence, the bank records, the company shares. I realized I had the one thing he could never replace: leverage. Without me, his empire wasn't complete. Without my cooperation, his business wasn't secure. He had treated me like I was invisible, but I was still the woman who held nearly half of everything he claimed as his own. As I lay in bed later that night, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly beside me, I knew the next steps were clear. I wasn't just going to leave him. I was going to take back my power, the power he thought I had lost. He believed Vanessa was his future. Let him believe that. Soon, he would discover what life looked like without me, and it would be a future built on nothing but regret. After that night, I stopped wasting energy trying to fix what was already broken. David thought I would stay in my place, quiet and compliant, while he built his life around Vanessa. What he didn't realize was that I had already decided to play my own game, one he would never see coming. The first step was finding someone who could take my shares off my hands. I didn't have to look far. In the business world, there were always rivals watching closely, waiting for the right moment to strike. I reached out quietly, careful not to leave any trace that could lead back to David. My lawyer helped arrange private meetings, each one carried out away from familiar places. The rival firm I spoke with had admired the strength of our company for years. They were eager, almost too eager, when they learned I was willing to sell. But I wasn't about to make a careless move. I wanted security, freedom, and terms that would protect me long after the ink dried. I listened, I asked questions, and I made sure every detail was in my favor. They thought they were just buying an opportunity to compete with David. What they didn't know was that they were also helping me close a chapter of my life on my terms. Each meeting gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I kept my composure, spoke calmly, and never once hinted at the personal betrayal that fueled my decision. To them, I was simply a smart businesswoman making a strategic choice. And in truth, that's exactly what I was. At home, David was none the wiser. He still believed I was loyal, that no matter how far he pushed me aside, I would stay. He carried on with Vanessa as if nothing had changed, and I let him. I smiled when I needed to, nodded during dinner, and let him think he had won. Inside, though, I was miles ahead, working toward the moment when everything would turn. Weeks later, after careful negotiations, the papers were ready. My lawyer laid them out on the table, his expression firm. "Once you sign this, Claire, you'll be free. And David, he'll never see it coming." I picked up the pen, my hand steady. For a moment, I thought of all the years I had spent building this company, of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I had poured into it. Then I thought of the way David had looked at me when he said I was holding him back. That memory gave me all the strength I needed. With one signature, it was done. My shares were no longer mine. They belonged to his rival. I had secured my future, my freedom, and at the same time, I had left David standing on unstable ground. He still believed I was at his side, but soon he would learn the truth. His empire was no longer safe. And this time, I would be the reason why. When the deal was complete and every paper signed, I knew the time had come to face David. I didn't rush it. I waited until the house was quiet, until there were no guests, no distractions, and no way for him to escape the truth. He came home late that evening, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, looking at me like I was just part of the furniture. He had no idea what was about to happen. I asked him to sit down. At first, he smirked, assuming I wanted another pointless conversation about our marriage. "Claire, if this is about Vanessa again, I don't have the energy," he said, dropping into his chair with his drink. I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out the folder I had been keeping hidden. One by one, I laid out the photographs, the receipts, the hotel records, and the bank statements. His eyes flicked over them quickly, and then he leaned back with a short laugh. "So what? You hired someone to follow me? You wasted your time. You'll never leave. You wouldn't dare." His arrogance didn't surprise me anymore. He had convinced himself I was too dependent, too loyal, too weak to take action. He thought his betrayal meant nothing because I had no choice but to endure it. I let him enjoy that confidence for one last moment. Then I pulled out the final set of papers, the contract showing the sale of my 45% stake in the company. I slid them across the table toward him. "You're wrong, David," I said calmly. "I already left. I sold my shares to your competitor. Everything you built is now in their hands." For the first time in years, he looked unsettled. The smirk faded. His hand froze on the glass he was holding. He leaned forward, scanning the documents with growing panic. You didn't," he whispered, though his face betrayed the truth. He knew I had. His confidence drained away as fast as the color in his cheeks. "Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed everything." His voice rose, but it no longer carried the same strength. There was fear in it now, the kind that comes when a man realizes the ground beneath him is no longer solid. I sat there quietly, watching the man who once believed he was untouchable crumble in front of me. He tried to threaten, then to bargain, but it was useless. I had already made my move, and there was no undoing it. When I stood up to leave the room, he called after me, his voice desperate now. But I didn't turn back. For once, he was the one left powerless. His empire, his pride, and his illusions of control, all of it was unstable without me. And he finally understood the truth. I was never the one holding him back. I was the one holding him up. Now, he would have to face the fall on his own. The morning after I showed David the papers, I began packing my I didn't make a scene, and I didn't wait for his approval. I had already decided that my future no longer included him. When he realized what I was doing, he tried to stop me. His voice was calmer now, less arrogant, almost pleading. "Claire, don't throw this away. We can fix this. I made mistakes, but you and we built everything together." His words no longer touched me. I had cried too many nights, begged silently for the respect he never gave. Now, his apologies felt empty, spoken only because he was afraid of losing what he couldn't control. I closed my suitcase, lifted it from the bed, and walked past him without answering. For once, I didn't explain myself. I didn't owe him anything anymore. Vanessa appeared soon after, smug and triumphant, convinced she had won. She flaunted her presence by his side, walking into public events with her chin high. She must have thought my leaving meant she had secured her place at the center of David's world. But it didn't take long for cracks to show. The new partnership with his rival drained his finances, and the stability he once bragged about began slipping away. Investors pulled back, deals collapsed, and the empire he had used to impress her was no longer as strong. Vanessa's smile faded little by little, and the woman who once gloated soon realized she had attached herself to a sinking ship. While their world unraveled, I started a new one. I moved into a smaller house, far from the glittering parties and the constant pressure of appearances. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and every inch of it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I woke up without fear of judgment, without pretending to be happy for the sake of appearances. I surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I was, not for the business I stood beside. Friends who listened, neighbors who smiled, and family members who reminded me I was more than the shadow of a man's success. David began calling after a few weeks. At first, his voice carried the same old confidence, as if I would come back if he simply asked. But when I didn't answer, the tone shifted. His messages grew desperate. He begged me to return, told me he couldn't manage without me, that Vanessa wasn't who he thought she was. Each call reminded me of one thing. He was finally facing the emptiness he had created. I never returned those calls. I had already walked away, and with every day that passed, the distance felt lighter, the silence sweeter. David had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. The difference was simple. My path led to peace, and his led to regret. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. My days were quieter now, but the peace that filled them was worth more than all the parties, the money, and the endless demands that had once surrounded me. I no longer woke up with the weight of someone else's choices pressing down on me. Instead, I woke up knowing every step I took was mine alone. Looking back, I realized something important. I never screamed. I never begged him to choose me. I didn't throw scenes at parties or fight with Vanessa for scraps of attention. That was never the kind of victory I wanted. Instead, I chose silence and patience. I gathered what I needed, moved carefully, and when the time was right, I took my power back without a single raised voice. In the end, my revenge wasn't about humiliating him in front of others. It wasn't about making a spectacle or shouting the truth for the world to hear. My revenge came in a quieter form, one that struck deeper and lasted longer. It was in the way I walked away with my dignity intact, while he was left with the ruins of what he once thought he controlled. David had built his empire with my help, with my sacrifices, and with my trust. And when he betrayed all of that, he believed he could push me aside like I was nothing. But my silence reminded him of something he had forgotten. I was never powerless. The very foundation he stood on had been built with me, and when I removed myself from it, everything around him shook. I didn't need to watch his downfall to feel satisfied. I didn't need to see the details of his struggle with the rival firm or Vanessa's slow retreat when she realized the wealth she chased was fading. What mattered to me was knowing that every morning he woke up and faced the truth, that he had lost me. Not just the woman he married, but the partner who helped create his success, the one who stood beside him when no one else believed in him. That was the piece he could never replace. My life was smaller now, but it was fuller in ways I had forgotten to value. I had freedom, self-respect, and the quiet joy of living without constant betrayal hanging over me. I learned that revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's choosing yourself, stepping away, and letting the other person live with the weight of their mistakes. He thought his mistress could humiliate me. Instead, he ended up humiliated, alone and begging. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply walking away stronger than before.